Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us today on our restarting of the conversations with Leger's Academic Committee. This is the first of a series. It's going to be for the next several months, 9 months, hopefully. It'll be the second Wednesday of every month. We'll have a conversation with one member of Leger's Academic Committee. Some of it will be pandemic related. Some of it hopefully will be just about issues are not related to the pandemic, and we can get back to not talking about it all the time. But today we're going to talk a little bit about it. I have Dr. Jacques Nantel with us. Next month, I will have Dr. Alan Middleton with us, and we'll be talking about mentorship as a key management skill in the post-pandemic world. There's that pandemic world, we're still talking about it. In December, Dr. Chuck Chakrapani is going to join us, and we're going to talk about technology innovations that will change our lives in 5 to 10 years. So that'll be the second week of December on the Wednesday, and we'll be doing lots of advertising for both those sessions. The remaining academic committee members will start as of January, and we'll have sessions throughout the winter and into the spring as well. Again, thank you for joining us. And Jacques, let me do a quick introduction. Dr. Jacques Nantel, he's the Professor Emeritus of HEC Montreal. He is the co-author of 5 marketing textbooks, along with numerous publications in professional journals. We have been working with Jacques forever, I think, a long, long time. And I'm very happy to have you back. Jacques, 18 months ago, we had a series of these, and you and I talked about what should retail be doing going into the pandemic. A lot has changed since then. It's been 18 months. I think I'm wearing the same jacket, and it no longer fits me for, I'm going to say, pandemic reasons. So I have to, speaking of retail, I now have to get out and do some retail shopping to get ready for this again. But maybe you can give us a little sense of where we're at now. And for those of you who are listening in, Jacques is going to present. If you notice in there's a little box to the right of your screen where it says questions. You can type any questions you have in there, and I will share them with Jacques at the end of the presentation, and we'll do a little bit of a Q&A, and then we'll wrap it up. But the floor is yours, Dr. Nantel.
Well, thanks, Dave, and thank you everyone for joining in. We're going to be talking about retail post-pandemic. Of course, we're still into a pandemic. There's a whole lot of things that have changed, and there are even more things that will change. I'll try to basically focus on the major ones, the ones that are more consequential. But basically what I'll try to do is to give you as fair assessment as possible at this time into the pandemic, and try to keep a, I would say probably not an optimistic view, but at least a realistic view of what's will happen and is coming our way as long as retail is concerned. But stay tuned, there are good news. Okay, I'll ask Dave to flip the chart. Yeah, thanks, Dave. Okay, if we look at the evolution of retail in Canada, and that's total retail in Canada on a yearly basis, basically what we can say is that retail in Canada is based on ups, downs, and waves. Just be careful when you listen to headline news or to various statistics about retailing. Journalists have a hard time dealing with that type of information, that type of data. Very often they will give you a percentage of increase either on the previous month or the previous year, or in percentage, or in total total absolute value. So it's very hard to follow. So what I did here is basically to give you an assessment of what's going on as long as retail is concerned, based on total sales, yearly sales, and going back to May 1918, so pre-pandemic. If you look at the left part of the graph, things were pretty steady, not a whole lot of growth. not a whole lot of decrease until, of course, we've hit February 20 or March 20. This is the big dip. Okay, this is what we went through, and then it goes up again. That kind of V-shaped recession that we were talking about did happen, especially in retailing for obvious reason. I mean, we got to go out, we got to buy food. Once in a while, we got to buy a new jacket. So it went back. I'd like to bring your attention to the right part of the graph, because this is where we are now. And that's what I say by saying retail in Canada, ups, downs, and waves, because we're into a pretty bumping road now. So it's hard to really get a fair assessment of what's going on. The big peaks and valleys that you see on the right part of the graph are basically due to confinement, deconfinement, opening, closing the economy, back and forth. So depending of where we were, like, and you can see it if you look at November, second wave, if you look at April, May, third wave, okay? If you were to put like a line across those dots on the right side of the graph, you might have the impression that, by and large, we're going up. At least there's a kind of upward trend. You got to be careful, because factor into those numbers are a important factor, which is called inflation. I'll come back to that in a moment. But currently, if you're looking at prices across Canada for various goods and services, there's an inflation factor. The Bank of Canada is reluctant to talk about it, even more so the Minister of Finance, but it's very, very much present. Throughout the last year, if you've been trying to buy a 2x4 or any type of lumber, or if you went out to buy a bicycle, or even now a car, you've probably noticed that there's at least some shortages and price increase. We'll come back to that later on, but keep in mind that if we were to look at the economy of retailing, we're pretty much out of that big dip that we went through. We've picked up things that we had to pick up, and we will, no doubt, if we were to project that graph 1 year down the road, we will be in a steady state in a moment. But that steady state might look a whole lot like where we were before the pandemic, with some variation, inflation being one of them, but we'll see there are others as well. The next slide essentially is one of them. One of which is, of course, you won't be surprised, is called e-commerce. We've been talking about e-commerce a whole lot before the pandemic, but we will talk about it even further now for an obvious reason. If you're looking at Canadian numbers, before the pandemic, although e-commerce was very, very much present in our life, and I'll come back to the slide in a moment, the pandemic truly accelerated the whole process for obvious reasons. Since we were all hiding somewhere in our basements, well, we had to reach out to the world to get whatever we needed, and e-commerce, especially Amazon, turned out to be a pretty good alternative. And of course, this is what Canadians have been learning. Keep in mind that, again, 50% of Canadians had already done any purchases on the web, with the exception of banking or buying air carrier tickets, but not products per se. But 19 months, after the beginning of the pandemic, we've all been buying at least something, and we found out interesting things, that for most of us, that we got a product in time, in a decent conditions, in a box. We didn't have to return it, and nobody stole our credit card, at least, again, for most of us. So Canadians have picked up on that, and the numbers on that graph that I'd like to bring your attention to is essentially the lower line, which is the percentage of total retail that is now going through the web. We were before the pandemic at 6.8. It grew up on the average in 2020 at 8.7. But actually, in the month of April and May, it went up all the way to 20%. So that valley that I presented on the previous graph, it actually went in the other direction for e-commerce, of course. And this is where Canadians have learned about e-commerce. We are currently around 10%. So just to give you a picture of what this 9.4 means, essentially, it means that everything that you and I are buying, out of that, 10% goes through the web. So 90% is still somewhere out there in stores. There are a lot of people, especially those who aren't in retailing, that will say, oh, so what? Even if you've lost 10% of your sales, big deal. Still have 90%. That's pretty good. When I hear that, I'm always tempted to say, well, what about if I were to chop away 10% of your salary? How would you feel? Because this is what retailers are basically experiencing and have been experiencing for years now. It is very consequential because it's a compounding effect. If retailers are selling 10% less than what they've been selling, they have, and it makes sense, they have a tendency to reduce their inventories and reduce their workforce. So customers going into those stores will say, they don't have quite what I'm looking for. Let's look if I could find it somewhere on the web. So there's a big compounding effect. To the effect that the numbers that I've been showing here, so 10.1% for 2022, 11% for 2023, and so on, I think that those are lower boundaries. I think that they will probably most likely be higher than that. So currently we're at 10%, and keep in mind that there's very, very little food-related products in there. There's no growth. There are almost no grocery product. If we look at the next slide, I'm going to show you one sector that has been affected a whole lot, and it's upholstery. Not upholstery. I'm sorry, apparel industry. If you look at that, that's my share of Canadian apparel industry. We were before the pandemic, and I went down the road all the way down to 2016, 9%, 10%, 11%, 12%, and during the pandemic, we went all the way. I'm going to look at it, just make sure because the number is so high, 34%. So we went up, and when people in their basement are buying up to 34% of what they're buying is through the web for apparel, they're getting accustomed to it. Okay, but there's more to it than what meets the eye. If we look at the next slide, I'd like to bring your attention to cross-border retail e-commerce. That's key. That's key. It has always been key when looking at numbers in reference to the web and to the internet. Okay, I've told you that currently we're around 10% what you and I are buying goes through the web. Okay, that's based on Stats Canada, and that's based on retailers' sales. So Canadian retailers, if you ask them, are you selling through the web, and if so, what is the proportion of your total sales? They will tell you about 10%. We're not interviewing American retailers to know exactly what is the proportion of their sales that are doing in Canada. To have that figure, we would have to interview customers, asking them, okay, what are you buying? Where is it that you're buying it? When we do that, and those are the numbers I'm showing here, when we do that, we're getting a different picture. Because if you were to take the summation of everything Canadian customers have been buying through the web, and comparing it to everything Canadian retailers have been selling through the web, it doesn't balance. Customers are always buying more than what retailers are selling. And the reason is there's a lot of cross-border retail e-commerce. We don't have the exact numbers in dollar, but we have the exact number on proportion. And if we were to assume, and that assumption holds, and I've been holding for years, this is something I've been following. This is something I've been following for the last 20 years. If we look at a proportion of Canadians who are telling, yeah, I'm buying from American, French, British sites, but most likely it's from American sites, currently we're at 37%. It's still growing. And the reason why it's still growing is that Canadian retailers, even throughout the pandemic, have been faring up with what American retailers are doing. So there's a lot of Canadian consumers that are turning around, buying in American dollars on sites, on American sites, I'm sorry. A good example of that is that although you have Amazon.ca, who, by the way, would be considered to be a Canadian retailer, not an American one. So even if you have an Amazon.ca, there's still a lot of Canadian consumer that will prefer to buy it from Amazon.com, thus in the United States, for two reasons. One of which is that there are some products available on the .com, which are not available on the .ca on Amazon. But the other reason is that even if they're paying in American dollars, they don't pay taxes. And our government still haven't moved on that. So there are wise consumers that will say, okay, I'm paying a premium of 10, 12%, but I'm saving, depending on the province where you stay, I'm saving in some cases up to 15%. And I have exactly the product I'm looking for. So there are 37% of the sales that we're doing that we're doing as consumer that are done somewhere else. So there's an increase. That 10% sales that Canadian consumers are doing on the web are probably closer to 13, and in some cases, and that's my appreciation. If we flip to the next chart, my take on that is that we're closer to 15% than we are of that 10%. So that's really where we are now. So it's a very tangible reality, which suggests that retailers, if they haven't done so, Canadian retailers would be well advised to think about their e-commerce strategy. If you're a retailer, if you are counseling retailers, if you're in that business center or near to, you got to think that you got to really put in full speed now, because if you don't have a decent web offer, you are going to get hurt if you haven't been hurt yet. It's only a matter of time. It's picking up, and we are really into it now. 15% is my appreciation. Okay, else than e-commerce, there are other KPI to follow. I'll try to summarize a whole lot of things that have been floating around. If you've been reading the Globe and Mail or the Economist or the Wall Street, those are terms that I'm sure, those are KPIs that you've been following. The first one is level of savings. We've been writing and saying so many things about levels of savings. It's amazing. Okay, let's look at it. In February 2019, so before the pandemic, the average level of saving, and that's a percentage of your total annual revenue, for Canadians was around 3%. So if you're making, or if an average consumer was making, let's say 100,000, or a household was doing 100,000 a year, I probably would save about 3%, so about 3,000 that year. In April 2021, the whole thing went up to 24%. Okay, that's based on both the Bank of Canada and Stats Canada. Okay, you gotta realize why. I mean, we were all hidden somewhere in our basement. We were afraid that the apocalypse would strike. We couldn't get out. We couldn't save. I mean, we couldn't spend. And at the same time, we were receiving the Canadian Emergency Fund Program. Some of them would coin it fund, not fund with a D, but fund without a D, so the Canadian Fund Program. So receiving that influx of money, some of which some consumer even didn't ask for, especially the elderly people. All elderly people, and by the way, I'm one of them, received a $500 check. Never asked for it, but good to have it. So what Canadians have been doing with that money is what a lot of economists had predicted, is that instead of spending it, they saved it. They saved it up to 24%. Now, the last number I have that on that goes back to August. It went down to 13%. So you know, the Canadian emergency funds are not available to everyone, and we finally been able to get out and start spending again. So it's down to 13%. My take on that is that don't expect to have the wild years that we saw in the 20s, the 1920s, that is, where everybody's going to go out and party for years. I don't think it will happen, because those savings are now like going down by the day. The other thing that you got to keep your eyes on is the level of debt. The level of debt of the average Canadian family, and this is as a percentage of your yearly income, was before the pandemic 186%. That's a lot. That's a historical high. Even Americans are not there anymore. If you're looking at the equivalent in the United States, we are closer to 145. So 186 is where Americans were before the 2007 crisis, 2008 crisis. It went down in April for obvious reasons. I mean, since we were saving, a lot of Canadians have that wisdom to say, okay, I'll take that money and I'll just put it down against my debt level. But it's picking up again. We're at 83% as of today. And the reason is that we're not like putting more products on our credit card. It's the housing market. For those who have a mortgage, of course, the housing market is so wild that anybody who's been moving or buying a house or a condo have been seeing their debt level going up. The third thing I'd like to keep your eyes on for the next couple of months is inflation. The central bank, the Canadian Central Bank, has a policy to keep it around 2%. In April, it was up to 3.5. Last summer, we were at 4.3. Next Wednesday, the Bank of Canada is supposed to announce where we are now, but the International Monetary Fund, I almost spilled the beans yesterday by issuing a report in which it basically says that Canada is facing even higher level of inflation. My take on that is that you'll probably hear something around 5%, if for nothing else, just considering the price of gasoline, which is really going through the roof now. So inflation will certainly be in the coming months something to keep your eyes on, and of course, interest rate will most likely follow. Okay, I'll go a little faster because I don't want to make. I just want to make sure that we're not short of time. So yeah.
Very quickly, I just want to remind anyone at this point, if you have any questions, there is a questions tab. Feel free to fill it out, and we will get to the questions at the end of this. So feel free to jump anything in there that you want. Sorry to interrupt, Jacques.
Sure. Okay. So the changing face of conventional retail. If we take those KPIs and what we've been going through, let's look at what's ahead? Okay, what's ahead is that 40% of Canadians could stay home to work. We've been showing that. The world has been going through the largest lab experiment that it could ever dream of, talking about stay-at-home work, and we found out that it worked. Technically speaking, 40% of Canadians could stay home. Let's say that 20% does so, and most likely, let's say that everybody goes back to work in downtowns, but 3 days a week. You would still be 40% off. Or everybody goes back to work except 1 day a week. You would still be 20% off. So keep in mind that the stay at home to work phenomena will take some business away, especially in downtown Canadian downtown centers for years to come and for months to come. There's no doubt, at least in my mind. 70% of them already told us in various surveys, certainly Léger surveys, but others as well, that if they could, they would wish to stay home after the pandemic. 65% of employers will let them do so to some extent. They believe that there won't be any decrease in productivity, but they know that they could reduce their costs. If you take an average business, let's say office work company having or renting 50,000 square feet downtown Toronto, that could mean savings of anywhere between $500,000 to $1 million a year. That's a lot of money. Many Canadians already moved to suburbs or even to countrysides. By the way, good news for businesses and retailers located there. We'll see it in a moment. There could be a comeback of Main Street Canada. We'll see it in a moment. Currently, 20% of office space are for rent. For rent. That means, you have the signage for rent. But you have an extra 25% which are empty. So for example, if you're going to any law or accounting firm downtown Toronto or Montreal or Calgary, employees are not there. They don't have any signs saying for rent yet, but employees are not there. During the summer of 2020, tertiary and suburban retailer center reach a 10% and a 5% increase in foot traffic respectively. That's a lot. I mean, this is so at a time where regional centers were going down by a decrease of 24%, suburban centers were seeing an increase of 10 to 5%. This is basically what I'm showing in the next slide. Those, by the way, are anticipated change in size of retail unit by asset type. This is a study that's been published recently by Colliers. My take on that is that it's probably much larger than that, because those are anticipated changes by landlords. But if you're looking at what's actually out there in the market, it's all the spikes on that graph, all the bar charts, all the bars on that chart are actually higher. So enclosed mall, those are regional conventional malls, minus 2.4%. Size, that's anticipated. We're in some cases we are higher than that. But conversely, neighborhood centers going up, and it makes a whole lot of sense. And this is the next slide. My take on that is that Main Street Canada is back in style for obvious reasons. I'll try to be as brief as possible. If you have 20% of the workforce who's not going back downtown, that means 20% of purchase that will be done closer to where people stay, so closer to their neighborhoods. More than that, if you consider that some of the workforce have already moved to tertiary zones or even countryside. That's a big influx for local commerce. If you add to it the e-commerce impact, which is, by the way, why should I take my car and go to a regional shopping center if I can order things? Okay, but conversely, yeah, but once in a while I'd like to go out. If I were to do so, I might want to go out nearby where I stay, take my bicycle that is, or walk. And those are things that you see all across the country. Main streets are on the uptick, and there's a great opportunity. I'm sitting on the board of one of the most important retailer in Canada, and so we have stores within enclosed malls, regional malls, and on neighborhood streets. And the place where we're seeing the highest increase is certainly not downtowns. It's really in neighborhood streets. So if we look at the next one, what will affect the future of retail in Canada? Well, I'm suggesting 4 things. Canadian retailers are not sufficiently present in e-commerce, no doubt. Again, if you're not really in full swing, make sure to be so. Omnichannel and agility are the next frontiers. We've been talking about a whole lot, but here's the deal. You got to make sure that your offer is 360, totally omnichannel and highly agile. It means that expect your consumer to want to do business with you through the web, but would like to see and feel your product in your store, in their neighborhood, even if they order on the web, and if they're not totally satisfied with the product, they will want to bring it back to your store next to where they stay. Totally agile. If you take all the combination and permutation of those touch points, you might say that's crazy. We got to be all around the place, all over. How can we achieve that? Well, you can if you keep in mind that your touch points might no longer be 2,000 square foot stores, but rather pop-up stores, displays. This is what I mean by agility. You got to make sure that you are where your customer wants to have a touch point with you. Of course, this excludes convenience stores. Nobody will buy a pack of chewing gum by the web, no doubt about it. You're going to be there. But if you're selling apparel, if you're selling furniture, if you're selling all type of other products, try to look at a combination of things, even if you're in the area of hardware. Hardware stores. Inflation. I wrote down inflation could be material, but I got to say that inflation will be material, no doubt. So just be ready. One of the reasons why inflation will be material, especially in retail, will have to do with salaries. You can always see the price of lumber go up and then go down, but the moment inflation touches salaries, we're due for a pickup because there's a ratchet effect. The moment you give increased salaries, you can't take them away, and this is where we are now, especially in retail. Walmart and Amazon.ca has already announced that they are raising substantially their salaries, and that they're hiring like crazy. So expect that there is going to be a big pressure on salaries, and that in turn will reflect on inflation levels. Finally, if interest goes up, consumption will go down due to the importance of real estate market. So of course, if you are caught with a mortgage that goes from 2.5 to, let's say, 4%, that's a lot of money that will not be in the market for retailers. So those are the things that I see in my crystal ball. Some of them are positive, agility, and the possibility to reach out to your consumer where they are, especially the comeback of Main Street Canada. I perceive that to be a true opportunity. Some of them are not good news. Inflation is certainly not one of them, and of course, higher interest rates isn't either. That's it, Dave. That's what I wanted to share with with folks. If you have any questions, I'll be happy to answer.
Yeah, thank you, Jacques. And again, any questions, please feel free to put them into the questions box. And I'm going to share those with Jacques while we have a chance here. Jacques, I have a quick question, something that's come up in the question box, but also something I've been wondering about. Kraft Heinz has come out and said people need to be prepared for higher prices. They're talking about inflation, they're talking about product price going up, and it's basically because of the limited supply of the raw materials that they're using.
Yeah.
You know, the auto industry is seeing microchip issues. The furniture industry went through a whole and is still going through delays. The lumber industry, it's, you know, we've had various times when we can buy wood and can't buy wood if we're going to do our renovations. How much is the supply issue going to affect this over the longer term as well?
Well, that's a very good question. Longer than I would hope for, much longer. For reasons that I will share in a moment. But I'm not from that school that basically says or think that it's really a supply factor that will not last the moment ships are back on the ocean. There's no doubt there's a shortage because there's a clog on the shipping industry. But the reason why there's a clog on the shipping industry is not because there's a ship that got caught into the Nile canal. It's much more profound than that. One of the major reasons why there's a clog in the supply chain is that a lot of the products that we're buying, especially consumption products, come from China. And there is a workforce shortage in China for reasons that are a little different than what they are here. Reasons that, by the way, were foreseeable and forecastable. China no longer has the workforce it used to have. See, Chinese employees are getting as old as we are. They're maturing 1 year every year, and there's a good chunk of the Chinese workforce that is going for retirement now, because China has for years that policy of the sole children, the single children. They don't have the replacement that they used to have, and that has a big impact, especially nowadays in Chinese ports. It doesn't explain all the shipping clock, but it explains some. So for the compounding of those two reasons, I don't think that we're going to have a full supply, or at least we're not going to see supply in full gear the way it was in February 2019. It might take much longer than that.
All right, thank you. And I'm going to give a quick plug to Dr. Middleton, because he has a question for you. So it's good to see our academic committee coming out to listen and learn from our academic committee. For those of you who are on, Alan will be joining us in a month to talk about mentorship. But right now, his question for you is, what sectors are you the most optimistic about, and where are you most pessimistic?
Oh, that's a okay. short-term optimistic, of course, restaurants and travel, because there has been, like, it's just like a spring effect. I mean, you've been pushing onto that spring, so it will go back in months to come. So short-term. Medium long term, I'm not as optimistic as I would like to, because if you have only 10% or 20% of consumers, Canadian consumers, that are not too keen of going back to restaurants because they found new ways of doing things, that could have a big indent on the long term on those industries. Where I am very, very much optimistic about, and we're seeing that, are on products that are related to getting back in shape, the outdoors, just making sure that we're like taking our lives back. And so bicycles, cross-country skiing, and products like that. Yeah.
Okay. Another question. So we talk about online retailing going to the US, and we're seeing a globalization of business, but you're also talking about Main Street coming up. So
Yeah.
to what do you think we'll see some of an unraveling or an adjustment of that globalization to be more on a mass scale, to be more focused on local and small businesses in the retail space?
Retail wise, yeah, very much so. It could be larger banners that will will have to get accustomed to operating through smaller stores. And I have like a lot of examples of that. La Vie en Rose, which is across Canada now, is opening all types of different stores, including pop-up stores, doing extremely well doing so. What we will not see as much as we used to are regional shopping centers, for a whole lot of reasons. But I would say that probably the main reason is that regional shopping centers weren't faring all that well before the pandemic. We got used doing we got used doing out of them. We got used not using them, if I would say, during the pandemic. There's not a whole lot of fun going back there. I think that what consumers are looking for are ways to get in touch with products and services closer to where they stay, especially if they are going to work from home. And that's the reason why I truly believe in Main Street.
Yeah, okay. And Alana, who had that question, has just confirmed a little bit, actually. Looking more about production. You talk about where China's at, and
Yeah.
we've got the globalization of production.
Yeah.
Let's take it away from the retailers and go to that. Are we going to see local plants start to pop up and more regional manufacturing or production than we have in the past?
That's a good question. We've been talking a lot about that. The problem is that, and there's a lot to be said about it, because we could think, and there are some to some extent, there are still some plants doing garments and pearls in Canada. Not a whole lot, but there's still. We could think of the whole. We could foresee that as a possibility, knowing that salaries will not be or wouldn't be the same as they are in China. But if shipping costs are very high and supplies is short, there might be an opportunity. I would not bet on that. The reason is that we've lost in Canada most of our skills in so many industries. It's unbelievable.
Yeah.
I'm currently working with a retailer who's doing all of its garment, or had them done, in China. We're considering manufacturing here in Canada. We can't find the skills. Not only the skills like people who could use a sewing machines, but the skills of people who would think about doing the patterns or the design. There's a big shortage of skills in a lot of industries.
Well, but it's going to come to a pressure point where, I mean, you talk about China in terms of the workforce available, but let's even talk about energy available right now.
Yep.
There's massive, in the clothing industry, there's massive plant shutdowns in China, where Canadian manufacturers that are looking to Chinese product are having a hard time getting it because they're only working 3 days a week right now
Yep.
because of energy issues. So there's
Yep.
it's got to come to a head at some point, and there's no solution as right now in Canada with the workforce, is what you're saying.
Well, the problem is that, it takes years to do it takes years to train a physician, but it takes years also to train somebody working in a plant.
Okay. So one or two last questions. Talking about online Quebec or Canada retailers that are doing a delivery service with what Eric Chaffoo has referred to as the Pony Express.
Mm-hmm.
So longer term deliveries. Do you see fast delivery going to be a key factor for consumer? And is this something that we have to start looking to with retailers as ways to increase that delivery to the end consumer?
No, I'll be very short. No, I don't think it's an issue. It's Pony Express is just fine. Even slow Pony Express is fine because, and this is something that we've known for years, and Amazon knows the hell about that, is that fast is great, but to be at the right place at the right time is even better. It doesn't do me any good to receive what I've ordered tomorrow if I'm not there tomorrow. I would rather have it like Friday morning, 10 o'clock. If you can assure me that it's going to be at the right time, at the right place, when I'm there, I would prefer that than to have it faster. In some cases, faster is a true disaster. So that says a lot to flexibility and to have a lot of touch points. Because if you can assure that the product you've ordered is going to be right next to where you stay at that local store that I operate, it might be even better. So we got to think in terms of flexibility rather than in terms of rapidity or to be just too fast. And that offers a lot of potential for Canadian retailers.
Okay. All right. So let's slow it down a bit. So here's the last question. Thinking of the trend of slower consumption among younger demos, how do you see that impacting retail outside of everything else that's going on? If we have slower consumption, that adds another layer to this.
Yeah. Slower consumption or deconsumption is we've been talking for years. It's very much part of what to foresee, but not necessarily for reasons that we think of. There's a lot of people who says, especially younger consumers says, yeah, I don't want to get into that consumption rat pack anymore or rat race. But the moment you're promoting something or flipping something or showing something, in some cases, they might be tempted. The reason why, if we're going to see the consumption or slower consumption, I don't think it has to be will be truly related to consumption values. It will have a lot to do with inflation, interest rates, saving, and of course reducing your debt level. This is very material, especially among younger consumers. The consequence, of course, is most likely going to be a slower consumption.
Okay, perfect. Jacques, thank you very much for doing this today. For everyone online, please sign up with myself and Dr. Alan Middleton on November 10th, when we're talking about how mentorship is a key skill that we're going to have to use coming out of the post-pandemic world. And again, we'll have ongoing discussions with members of Leger's academic committee. And the beauty of having this academic committee is that internally we have this wealth of resources that we can tap into. We're happy to share it with you today. For everyone who's on that works with Leger, there is another session for us, especially with Jacques immediately after, where we continue to ask questions. So if you're a member of Leger, please log off and then please log back on with the next session, and we can continue to pepper you with questions a little bit about this, Jacques. But thank you to everyone else.
Thanks.
Bye now.